Who is this guy? But in the past 9 years, the dude had only one fight. So yeah, man, McGregor is really good at feeding other fighters delusions. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to MMA Soap Opera, cause that's what it is. I'm your host Sergey, and once again, today is the day. Let's talk some MMA. But before we jump into today's topics and discussions, make sure to hit subscribe, like, and ring the bell. It costs you nothing, but helps the channel immensely. And now that we have that out of the way, let's jump into today's topics. Alright, we just had another fight night, which was Royval versus Taira. And I gotta say, overall it was quite fun event. Some fights were super good, and I want to lift out two fights especially. Those were the standouts for me. So the first one was Dawson versus Garcia. And man, I gotta tell you, Dawson is such a beast. And I thought that he just outclassed Garcia in pretty much every single way. And man, I just realized, if you look in the fight history of Dawson in his last fights, so out of the last 6 fights, he lost only once against Bobby Green. And that was like pretty much 1 year ago in October as well. And considering how great he looked in this fight, I really believe that he's ready for like another top 15 opponent. Hopefully we won't have to wait too long before he returns in the octagon, because some of these prospects, man, they're taking their time. Alright, the second fight that I want to lift up from this past fight night, of course, is the main event of the evening, Royval versus Taira. That was such an exciting fight, man. I thought that both fighters did really well, and I was really impressed by Taira, man, considering that he's like, what, 23, 24 years old, something like that, right? Like, despite him being so young, he's technically like already up there. And he was really tough as well, man. I think this is the first time we saw him go in the distance, right? Especially in the 5-round fight. And Royval, man, I thought that he worked his ass off, and even though he was quite often in really uncomfortable situations, especially on the ground, obviously, I really felt like he showed that he can work through the adversity. One thing that I thought was kind of weird though, that once he was talking to the microphone at the end of the fight, he was talking about his opponent Taira, saying how he is gonna become a champion one day and how he wants to help him with that. I thought that was kind of weird. But anyways, let's talk about some implications after this fight, because I think that this is opening the door to some super exciting events. So UFC just announced UFC 210, and one of the main fights of the event is going to be Pantoja versus Kai Asakura. Who is this guy? Of course, I did some reading up on this guy. Turns out that he's like super massive start in Japan. We haven't had this situation for a really long time, that a new prospect would have a debut in UFC and would fight for the belt right away. I know that this happened a couple of times in the past, but not like in the modern era. It wasn't in like 2010s last time. But anyways, hear me out. So Royval just won against Taira, right? If Kai somehow defeats Pantoja, I think that we can get a UFC Japan card. Because if this Kai Asakura is such a massive star in Japan, and we also have Taira, who just fought in the main event, that means that Japan has now 2 big stars, and I think that they can easily build a whole card around it. So imagine this: Kai defeats Pantoja. Pantoja is gonna take some time to rest, and Royval is gonna have a main event in Japan versus Kai for the UFC belt. And as a co-main event, we can have Taira fight another top 5 opponent. And that will basically make 2 big fights with 2 Japanese stars for the Japanese UFC card. So I'm telling you, man, if this Kai Asakura is gonna defeat Pantoja, we're probably gonna get UFC Japan in 2025. Exciting times, man, exciting times. Alright, let's move on. Another fight that was announced was, of course, Belal Muhammad versus Shavkat Rakhmonov. I think that in the welterweight division, this is probably one of the most exciting fights that they can make right now. And in my opinion, what is the most exciting thing about this fight is that these fighters are actually fairly similar. It just feels like Shavkat is one step above Belal in every single thing. We know that Shavkat is a pretty damn good wrestler. We know that he's finishing all his opponents. We know that in stand-up he's a beast. But it's really difficult to bet against Belal, man, because in every single fight in the past 2 years, everyone was betting against him, including me, and look what the guy achieved. So I don't know, man, I think that Shavkat is gonna win, but this fight is gonna be way closer than anyone would expect like 1 year ago. Next fight on the same card of UFC 210 should be Diaz versus Vicente Luque. So in here, I don't really get what is the hype about Nick Diaz. Like, I get that he's a massive personality from back in the day, but that's the problem. From back in the day. Like, he had what, like 1 fight in the last 5 years? Actually, let's check it out. Yeah, there it is. So, the last fight of Nick Diaz was, of course, Diaz versus Lawler, which was on September 26th, 2021. And before that, his last fight was in January 31st, 2015. Like, of course he got suspended because of the weed situation, I get that. But in the past, what, 8-9 years, the dude had only one fight. Like, what exactly are we hoping for in here? Like, clearly, this guy is coming back just because this is the only way how he can make some serious money. And I don't know, man, like, why does everybody want to see Nick Diaz back? Like, what kind of performance is everyone expecting from him? Do you really think that he's gonna fight the same way as he thought against PJ Penn or George St. Pierre? Like, that fight against GSP was in 2013. I don't know, man. Diaz versus Vicente Luque. I think that Vicente Luque is just gonna dominate Nick Diaz, and it's probably not gonna be pretty. Alright, the next topic that I want to talk a little bit about is Umar Nurmagomedov, who keeps talking about Merab Dvalishvili. It's obvious why Umar is talking to Merab. Of course, his next fight is probably gonna be for the belt, but I gotta say, man, I'm kinda on the side of Merab on this. Like, I don't think that Umar is deserving a title shot either. I understand that we just talked about this Kai Asakura guy, the Japanese star, who is about to have his UFC debut and is gonna be for the belt right away, but Umar is in a very different situation than that guy. Umar has been in UFC for quite a while and he has been trying to build himself up. And I gotta admit, of course, Umar had some great performances, but the guy actually had only one fight in top 15. And the difference between Umar and this Kai Asakura guy is that Kai Asakura clearly is a massive star. And not just that, this guy is a massive star in a market where UFC has a big history. And it's obvious that they want to come back to that market as well. Whereas Umar, of course, he also has big fan base, but like generally speaking, if you measure the temperature in the room of UFC and MMA community, I don't think that Umar is that exciting and brings that many fans. So yeah, man, I think that Merab has a really good point, and I understand why he wants to fight Figgy as well, because not only Figgy is a champion in the lower division, a champion that has defended his belt several times, he already has a really good run in the bantamweight division because not only he defeated 3 guys in this weight class, 2 of them are in the top 10, and his last fight was of course versus Chito Vera, who just fought for the belt. And he won with unanimous decision over Chito as well. So I do understand why Merab thinks that Figgy is more deserving to fight for the belt than Umar is. And I'm on his side, man. I think that Merab is right. Alright guys, we're pretty much done with today's episode, but one last thing that I want to mention, Conor McGregor. One thing that I think is super funny about Conor McGregor is that he's so good at feeding into fighters' delusions. He just had some exchanges with Dan Hooker, who is clearly yet another fighter who thinks that he's gonna get a fight against Conor McGregor. I understand that it probably doesn't cost anything for Dan to try to push for this fight, and maybe he doesn't really believe that he's gonna get it. Yes, it's possible that Conor McGregor is gonna come back next year for his last 2 fights, but once again, it's a very similar situation as with Nick Diaz. Conor McGregor was also super inactive in the past years, and he's also coming back after a serious injury. I think that there is a massive chance that Conor McGregor is just straight up not coming back. So yeah, man, McGregor is really good at feeding other fighters' delusions. That's it for today, guys. Massive thanks for watching today's video, and if you liked it, of course, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to the channel before you watch one of the last week's episodes. And of course, new content is coming really soon. We're trying to post at least twice a week. So yeah, have a great day, everyone. This was your host Sergey from MMA Soap Opera, because that's what it is.